Hi everyone, so I decided to record a little bit of the key information from our Indigenous Americas unit as well as the New Spain. Now, heads up, New Spain does come from Content Area 3, but it is tacked on because I feel like it fits the curriculum a little bit better with the Americas. So we're going to start with Mexico. We'll start that with the first video. We're looking at a few different civilizations that are happening pretty early here, much later than our early civs that we talked about in Mesopotamia and such. We're all in the kind of year 1000s zone. Olmecs we don't get to talk about too much, but they are huge and kind of help influence some Aztec stuff. You can see that crossover there. Mayans, and of course the Aztecs. So for the Mayan piece, we have Yaxchilan. It is in Chiapas, Mexico, 725 CE, and we got limestone. Now the Mayan piece that they chose is such a perfect example. It is dense though, because this is a civilization that we don't know much about what happened at the end. We do, however, have a ton of information because of their writing system, which you can see their writing there on that lintel. So some big ideas for Yaxchilan is the lintel. Those are those flat carvings. They are usually horizontal beams, and like our post lintel, right? We have our posts and our lintels. That's where they would have been above doorways, typically. And then the Mayans were also tied into this bloodletting practice. Now, bloodletting is different than blood sacrifice. It is the letting go of blood. It's a little bit of a blood sacrifice, but not killing or any of that kind of stuff. Blood is tied into the celestial, to this other world, to the heavens, to gods, and to spirits. So that giving up of blood is a communication with the spiritual side. And then we do see the style of clothing with the huipil, sorry. But we see that in their visuals a lot. So a little bit more about that bloodletting. It's a lot about ceremony, about ritual, and all of this is to connect the leaders especially, but the high-end people to the gods. And we actually get to see women being part of this process. They have this more divine role. And what that does is when they do these bloodletting rituals, which we'll see with Lady Shook, it creates these hallucinations because you're losing a lot of blood. There's burning incense. It's to help kind of tap into that more spiritual side and creates those hallucinations to hopefully see the gods. But you know, they're hallucinating, which is really fun. And that's because they believe they're descendants of gods, which we saw that in other civs as well. It's not like the pharaohs. The pharaohs thought they were walking gods, so this is more the descendants of gods, more like China. Visually, we're looking at a huge complex here. Each of the buildings, they have labeled as numbers, so we're seeing things like structure 32 or 23. We're looking at lintel 25. It's all labeled based off of how they discovered it, but this is in Valley of Mexico, north, part of that Yucatan Peninsula area, so closer to Guatemala. It's very dense jungle. They actually didn't know this was here for a very long time. Discovered it a little bit later and kept discovering more and more and more as the trees had blocked a lot of this. The thing that we're interested the most in is the contextual here. There's a lot of cool visuals, but the structures and these lintels especially, you can see so many cool details about Mayan culture and interesting contextual information. So first off, big figure here, Lord Shield Jaguar, right there. Shield Jaguar. This is the the translation of their names, and it's commonly referred to as that because they're using their names to create a sense of power. It's always about lineage and power and strength. And tying it to the jaguar, big scary cat, like the lions in our Egyptian art, jaguars here. Lord Shield Jaguar then is the guy in charge, and they're showing him off and showing his power and importance and authority. And here we have this commemoration of victory in battle. But we also see his wife, Lady Shook, taking on a more divine role here. So that's the pronunciation of Shook right there. Here's one of the structures. You can see their geometric approach to architecture. Stairs have kind of been worn from time, but stairs always important. Higher up, the more important it is. Really fun bracketing system up here. Not like the Korean bracketing that we looked at. It's not cross brackets, but you do have that really good sense of rhythm throughout. Great symmetry, very geometric form. Some other views, sorry for the blurry images, you can see that the geometry matches their language. Their language is very geometric. See language there. It is pictorial. It is very geometric, and that influences the rest of their style of art. All right, so here we're seeing some of these important lintels. I would say these two on the left here are most important, and here's a breakdown of what is going on as the details have been kind of lost. They would have been painted always, right? With the paint, it tends to go. But lintel 24 and 25 really show that Mayan culture off. And you can see all the specific details, but the reason we know so much about this is because of that writing system that has been translated. The Mayans were super good at looking at astronomy and calendar and record keeping, just like we saw with Egypt, with Greece. There's that consistency there. So they're creating date system in references to alignments of planets like Jupiter and Saturn, and that's informing the whens to go along with the whats. So we have Shield Jaguar holding a torch, suggesting that the event is occurring at night. So we see a little bit of drama, right? Darkness always makes things more dramatic. We see this very elaborate headdress and the huipil worn by Lady Shook. This is Lady Shook here. You can see that idealized form. It's in reference, but it's not like an exact replica of what they looked like. There's definitely ideals that are being depicted here. And it's that flattened perspective because we have this relief carving. They're carving into the surface instead of trying to pull the figures out of it like the Greeks did. They're letting them sit within that surface. So very subtractive work. The form is flattened. So what's happening is Lady Shook is pulling a whole thorned cord through her tongue to do that bloodletting process. The blood then falls into the basket, and that's going to begin that ritual. And the torch is help lighting that. Now imagine sitting there watching this happen in the dark, torch lit, and your queen is sitting there kneeling, dragging a corded rope, thorned rope through her tongue. Just blood everywhere. Good times. Party on a Friday. So we see even more of this power authority. They are in the same proportion and scale. He does stand above her, but they're not equal, if that makes sense. It creates a nice asymmetrical balance, but it doesn't feel like she's any less important. But Shield Jaguar, he's not safe. He will be letting out blood too. He's got the Quetzal feathers. He's decorated out in the regalia, so you know he's going to be partaking as well. You have this very elaborate dress and ceremonial garb to help build the majestic feeling of this whole ceremony. There's little a codex book, right? So the cord is falling onto the book, the blood falls onto that, and that's helping communicate with the gods. So we see that there. Now, lintel 25, we see this story continue. There is this more sense of the hallucination now. So Lady Shook's still down here. And then we have this serpent god spitting out this unknown warrior. We don't know who exactly this is. There's some guesses, but nothing confirmed because that part's not written. But you can really see that geometric rhythm of Mayan art all throughout. Very repetitive and ornate and detailed, but flattened and simplified. There's just enough detail to be able to tell everything apart and let the shadows hit that background to really pull those figures forward without them actually being forward. So once the blood has been drawn, she now is hallucinating, she's seeing the god, she's communicating with those spirits, and it helps the woman in these roles understand, pick kings and warriors. It's a divine role for women. So very prestigious. It is very powerful, but in that sense of spiritualism. So this is her seeing that God and helping maintain that order in the community. That is her job. We have the dates again associated with this. So October 20th, 681. It's nice to have those exact dates. Obviously, that's adjusted for our Common Era calendar, but it's all written record as well. We love when there's written record. So serpent opens mouth, blah, warrior gets spat out, which is totally normal to see. And she's like, yeah, cool, love it, it's great. We don't know the warrior, like I said. It could be shield jaguar, could be a god, could be a generic warrior. There's not enough information to go off of because of that idealized form. They kind of end up looking the same a little bit, just like with the Greek statues. You can argue the Aphrodite, Artemis, Diana, all those kind of genericisms with our Peplos Kore as well. But she is still holding like that bowl in her hand. She's looking at the serpent. There's this very dramatic feel, implied line going down towards her, very elaborate. Most likely this would have been showing off decorations in jade. Jade, very important to the Mayans in particular. So some detailed stuff. This is another lintel that's found there. You can see that as jaguar here. We see more continuation of the story, more writing. This one's not as detailed though. But I do like that this one really shows the difference in their height, feeling a lot more naturalistic. It's not a hierarchical scale. It just feels like she's a little bit shorter here. Could you argue it? Yeah, probably, but she is an important member of this society as well. Now these, again, they would all have been painted, and they were most likely painted with a blue that is today known as Mayan blue. If you want to learn more about it, you can click on the link on this slide. It comes from this plant here, and it creates that really nice, rich blue. And as we see in other cultures, blue gets used a lot to show kind of a strength or spiritual or power or riches, any of that kind of stuff. So just more of the complex and some other Mayan art, so you can see that continuation. If there's an attribution question, you'd be able to see that geometry. Definitely check out the writing. Writing is the big dead giveaway on that. Most familiar to most of us, if we're looking at Mayan art, are the pyramids of their temples. Here's some more of that Mayan blue. And then we move on to the Aztecs. So with the Aztecs, they come later than the Mayans. The Mayans are already wiped out by the time the Aztecs are around. Again, we don't really know what happened to the Maya. Same with the Olmecs. They kind of die out before the Aztecs. So the Aztecs are the last big civilization in Mexico leading up to colonization of Europe, when they arrive and defeat the Aztecs through various means. So this piece is another one that's so important and has so many elements. It's 250, but not really, right, in our art world, especially with the architecture. So we are looking at Templo Mayor, or the main temple, but it does have a lot of other elements here. The location, Tenochtitlan, very important location for the Aztecs and Mexico today, because that is modern Mexico City. Tenochtitlan is huge as part of the Aztec origin story. So of course, culture is Aztec or Mexica. Date 1375 to 1520. And again, we're leading up towards the fall of the Aztecs as well. Media stone for the temple, so the temple itself stone. We have volcanic stone for the Coyolxauhqui stone, which is down here. Volcanic stone a little bit more porous. Jadeite for the Olmec style mass, so you see that greenish hue. And basalt. Basalt for the calendar stone. Basalt is like Nanbadol, same exact cubic kind of form of rock. So here's a recreation of what Templo Mayor would have looked like. We have lots of drawings, records, paintings by the Europeans who came and others that kind of depict what this would have looked like. So we have a good idea. It's just not around today looking like this. We do have two important temples here at the top, very tall staircases. You ascend towards the heavens in pretty much every culture to show that power and importance, and then the larger area around would have all been that main capital city. Tenochtitlan being the capital of the Aztec Empire, they were a more warrior-based people and society, so having that strong capital, very important. So the breakdown of the temple, we have Huitzilopochtli temple over here, and then the Tlaloc temple over here. So two important gods, showing their duality. We saw duality early on in our global prehistory with the small figurine, and here we're seeing duality again. Then the large staircase, and at the bottom of Huitzilopochtli's temple is the Coyolxauhqui stone, so it would have been located at the bottom. More decorations of serpents. Snakes are also very important. Snakes and jaguars and eagles and large birds, very important in the Americas as those figures of power, like we saw the lions, the bulls, etc. This is where it is today. Oopsie poops. So it's gone. Various reasons for it to be gone. I don't know them off the top of my head, but you can see the remnants of those stairs there. So that's sad. But here's the Coyolxauhqui stone. We have that. And this tells the story of Coyolxauhqui, who went against the gods, specifically Huitzilopochtli, and was thrown off the stairs, the theoretical mountain, and dismembered as a reminder of Huitzilopochtli's power, of Aztec power, and to not deface the gods in any way. Don't go against the gods, how dare you? She's tied up, she's surrounded by these skeletal figures, she's got her limbs dismembered, and then she is bared nude as well. So that's not done in a, oh look at the body, it's so pretty kind of way. This is done in a embarrassing kind of way. We do see that she was probably a mother because of the rolls and the sagging breasts and the little bump here, so they're showing that the leftovers of womanhood and birth. She is still highly decorated, but it is still a reminder of what not to do. Here we have calendar stone. And the calendar stone would have been adopted similar to kind of the Mayans had a very similar stone as well. And these would have been recording the days that have been and the days to come. And it has this circular diagram to kind of move its way out radially. You see it's kind of set up almost like a compass. And with the Aztecs, there's this belief that humans and people and gods and all that work in cycles. Very kind of similar to how China has the dynastic cycle, where the idea is it will fall and then revive again, or like reincarnation in Hinduism, it's this life and death cycle. Except the Aztecs, they're thinking of it more as like the earth in general, like there's an apocalypse to end all of it, and then it restarts again. I believe the idea at this point was they were on the 4th or 5th world. I can't remember off the top of my head. But that's why we have that radial symmetry. You have the figure in the center, powerful animal figures that all represents that kind of cycle idea. We'll get into that more in a second. And then the Olmec mask. The Olmecs were a group of people. Let me fast forward for a second. I will come back. Olmecs, where are you at? So the Olmecs were a group of people. There we go, very tiny mask. They were a group of people that existed before the Aztecs. They were known for this style of art with the enlarged heads, these kind of almost infant-like faces with the larger foreheads, the downcast mouth, the smaller but wider nose. This is very Olmec style. They were revered by the Aztecs, and having an Olmec mask shows how powerful the Aztecs were to have that ancestry kind of tied into the Olmecs. Again, we don't know too much, but this would have been found at the temple, but was taken during conquest. Okay, back I go. So story of Templo Mayor and Tenochtitlan in general is that it is built upon a lake. We have it set up with cardinal directions, very, very important. Directions important in the Americas. Seemingly almost every major group kind of tied directions into their art and architecture. But being able to go and conquer a water-based region like this is absolutely insane in the technical mastery of architecture and irrigation and agriculture and management. It is impressive. The story goes that that the Aztec people, the Mexica, were going and following an eagle that would bring them to kind of, not the promised land's not a good way of putting it, but to the heart of the empire. And the eagle lands on this cactus while devouring this snake to fulfill that prophecy. So they say, okay, Templo Mayor will be built there. That is our going to be our capital right there. So they begin the construction in 1325, and it kept like getting bigger and bigger until the Spanish conquest in 1521. Templo Mayor would have then been like the center of religious life. It's temples, right? And would have really gathered people here at the capital of Tenochtitlan. It's the heart of the Aztec Empire. Unfortunately, the Spanish were like, ew, gross. That's not our religion or our people. Let's destroy it. Yay! So it was completely kind of wiped out, lost over time. They weren't going to preserve something that wasn't theirs, and represented the strength of the Aztecs, so the Spanish kind of covered it up. So we didn't even see Tenochtitlan remnants, the Templo Mayor, until 1978. So that's where we get those stairs that we saw earlier. That's very, very recent. So looking at our temple, you can see the two temples, again, very important. Tlaloc, god of agriculture. Huitzilopochtli, god of war and sun. So you can see just from that what they are prizing. Agriculture, war, sun. Sun is important because it informs the calendar stone. So there's the remnants again. Yikes. Rough. And then one other thing before I move forward is this idea of the chiampas. Chiampas being these waterways in irrigation style. This is how the Aztecs crushed it as far as being able to maintain their empire, is this chiampa system. So these floating agricultural gardens. So they're bringing water in, controlling the water, and helping it grow their crops. Really kind of crazy to do it, especially around this region, but you have to do what you have to do to survive. So showing off their skill in irrigation and science there. So we do see other figures throughout Templo Mayor. We have some that remain today. You see they would have been painted again, so some of the paint survived for a bit, but not forever, of course. Paint doesn't like to survive. So the two temples would have also represented major mountains for the Aztecs, and each side were decorated in statues that fit that god and those mountains. So for example, Tlaloc's god of agriculture, you see these frogs. Frogs represent rainy seasons. So it helps kind of fulfill that narrative of those mountains. But on top of the temples, we have blood sacrifice. Yay! So part of the Aztecs, they weren't like sacrificing people daily, right? It's not like totally crazy. But they would be these offerings to the gods so that you can have good agriculture. How are you going to show the agriculture god that you mean business? So you got to sacrifice a person or usually animals on the steps of that temple. So they would sacrifice, carve out bits depending on the ceremony, and let the blood run down the steps to represent that blood going to the gods and becoming one with the theoretical mountain. And then that would help kind of bring out the god and appease them. So that death to bring on life. So if you're asking for good agriculture, you are willing to give up some to get. And that was very popular for the Aztecs. Here's an example of what the Coyolxauhqui stone would have looked like, possibly in color. Would have been very colorful. You see the red representing that blood around. As she is at the bottom of the stairs, the blood would have ran onto her. So it looks almost like the sacrificial stone. So here's a little bit more about the Olmec mask here. It was very valuable, historically significant. They would have polished that jadeite so it had that nice shiny surface. But again, connecting to the power of the Olmecs through lineage later to the Aztecs. Here's the sunstone or the calendar stone. It's going over this idea of the cosmos, that creation of time. There is unfinished areas because the idea is to keep telling history. Time is circular, keep going and going and going. But unfortunately, when you get conquered, time kind of stops for your empire. Here's some more images here so you can see that that surface right there. But there would have been more. So it kind of stops there. And then the Coyolxauhqui stone here, again, you can see it in color. Here's another diagram being dismembered, all of that. So people could also have been sacrificed on it, specifically to show why they are chosen. It's very graphic. It did have a large crack in it. So that's still there. Whoops. And if we're looking both at the sunstone and the Coyolxauhqui stone, you can see they're very similar, but also very different. Both are about deities, so gods. They're both circular. They're both this low and high relief combination, kind of like how the Mayans did their stuff. They would have been painted. They're very stylized. They're made of volcanic stone, and most likely laid flat. So we see the calendar stone being laid up vertically, probably not how it would have been displayed. Probably. However, so visually the sunstone, it's a lot more organized into like small compartments, right? There's more of a consistent pattern here. It's got this radial balance. You have a center point and then it radiates out. There's more symbolic references here. There's references to different ages, to fire serpents, hands are holding heart. So it's a lot more nuanced than the Coyolxauhqui stone, who is just moon goddess in warrior attire with the dismembered limbs. So showing it's moon versus sun, right? And she's also very asymmetrically balanced, depending on which way you're looking. It does not have a center point. We're looking at her face and kind of moving throughout it instead of center out completely in a patterned way. There's also arrows pointing towards the cardinal directions. Again, we have that sense of direction. There are no arrows there. We do have a lot of movement. That creates more chaos. Functions are different too. So function is a calendar versus sacrificial stone. That's always important. Always look at the functions when you're compare contrasting. But both do still depict the idea of sacrifice or the theme of sacrifice. The sunstone's about creation of the world through sacrifice of gods, because they have to give up to create for the humans. And then Coyolxauhqui is a sacrifice herself. We see, yes, it was 5th era. Look, I was right. So we have the 5th era of the world, in which each era ends with a different death. That's what these representations are here. So you have that sun representation, sun god there, and then you have death by jaguar, death by wind, death by rain, death by water. So those are those 4 points there. And then the cardinal directions focusing on continuous time. It's not finished, it keeps going out. While Coyolxauhqui stone over here is looking at Huitzilopochtli's story, pushing her off the mountain, and then splats onto the floor. Whoops, she goes squish. Both are cosmology, though. So the idea of the cosmos. Some more images so you can see how she would have lain flat down there. And some more of that same idea. Now another Aztec piece that we have is our ruler's feather headdress, or we think Moctezuma II's headdress. Probably, not entirely. We don't like to work in definites when we don't have it written. But it is belonging to a ruler. It is Aztec again, 1428 to 1520. Again, the Spanish are coming in and conquering. And it's made of feathers, specifically that of the Quetzal and the Cotinga, as well as the gold. You can see that gold throughout that. Very beautiful, very ornate headdress, just like our Ahu'ula from Hawaii. We're seeing the use of feathers to create this sense of decadence again, and it's beautiful. You can see the smaller feathers. The Quetzal's the green one. The Cotinga is the smaller bird here. Those feathers there. It is 3.8 feet tall. So you know the size of a small child, and 5 feet wide, the size of me. So very large headdress, so imagine that sitting on your head. They would have used male Quetzals. They only have about 2 to 3 feathers, so about 450 Quetzal birds had to be used for this. It was their tail feathers, so they are... Again, they're taking care of the birds. They're not going to kill these because of the tie to the Quetzalcoatl, the bird snake god. They're not going to upset the gods that way. So they're not fully sacrificing all of those birds. The blue comes from the Cotinga. And then we do have some other feathers mixed in with spoonbill. We have sticks, we have it all layered in semicircles, and then the gold is the ornamentation here. It probably had a gold bird beak there, so that you do have to sacrifice a bird for, to put on the center of that headdress. This would have been created by the Amanteca, which is the feather workers. They were known, see there's the gold beak there. The Amanteca were feather workers. Those were very prestigious workers that did all of this feather weaving, and feathers were important to Aztec culture. It would have been Aztec, part of some sort of costume, regalia, not like costume in a modern sense, but it would have been for rituals and performances. So not something that would have been worn on the day-to-day. The materials are also acquired through trade and tribute, so you see the importance of trade and people paying commission to the Aztecs, because what they would do, they would spread out and they would say, we will take care of you if you give us stuff, and if not, we will not take care of you. We will do the opposite, and we will fight you, and you will suffer. So that is what the Aztecs did. Unfortunately, we have this guy, Hernán Cortés. He was a Spanish conquistador. The conquistadors came to see what's up with America. What is this new place that we've never heard about? Gotta check it out. So they check it out, and they check it out with guns and diseases and a lot of anger. They barter at first. There's some mutual negotiating, but not for long, because conquistador means conquest. The idea is take for Spain, keep taking, bring it back to Spain. Now you're this honorable position in Spain. So it creates this Spanish versus Aztec war here that wipes out the Aztecs because of the modern use of guns and other weaponry. The Aztecs were a very strong empire, but they don't have the same technological advances that benefited from the trade of the larger continental groups of Europe, Asia, Africa. It's just crazy the amount of difference in what was important, right? Where nature still very important here, not as important in our other continents. We don't know if the headdress was taken by force or gifted, but it did make its way back to Europe. And it's now sitting in Austria, and there's deals going back and forth between Austria and Mexico to see if Mexico can get it back. Austria says no, it'll disintegrate if we try to send it. Mexico's like, but it is ours. So it's a stalemate. Here's work by other Amanteca, so you can see how feathers are constantly used, beautifully used. The fact that you can weave feathers in this kind of way to create such beautiful imagery is so impressive. Shows off the power of the Aztecs. And feathers still important in representing Aztecs today in that lineage, trying to pay homage. And you can see that process being depicted here in this manuscript. So that is all for Mexico.